Morning. Say hi. Where are you going? Where? What? You jumped up here. I thought you wanted to say hi. Guess not. Ah, cats. What are you gonna do? So, good morning. Um, sorry about the late start. Um, we are still watching the hearing within the Phil Spector trial because of the guy that was at the crime scene with the defense team and went to the DA about a fragment of tooth that was found on the floor and hidden. And we list so his name is Gregory Diamond. Let me say hi first before we get started. Who we got here? Hi, Carla. Hey, Jelly Bean. Judy. Hey, guys. Yes, thank you so much for those charts, Judy. They were really hard to. The one with the pictures, I wish I'd known how to blow it up better because that was really helpful. Um, and I still got Caitlin and Allie mixed up, but anyway. So Gregory Diamond is the guy that went to the DA. So, and he really did not want to testify. And I was like, dude, you went to the DA and the New York Times and the LA Times and the Smoking Gun. Um, and he doesn't want to testify. And what have I got on my glasses? And they were asking him, well, why did you go to them? What did you want to do? Well, I wanted the people to know. Okay, you're in trial now. Testify. He kept asking the judge, well, can I just say one thing? No, you have to answer the questions. Just answer the questions. So the guy we watched yesterday was not a licensed private investigator. What did he call himself? He said he's a private investigator. He's just not licensed and he uses another word for it. It's semantics to get around with not having a license. Now, now there's a defense attorney. They've said her name a bunch of times. You guys know my chemo brain. I think the last name is Kaplan. So she's on the stand for like a half an hour, and then Stan White is a private investigator that was there, and his testimony is about an hour long. So we're gonna go ahead and try to get through that, and then Karen Reed starts at 9, but it'll be okay if we're a little bit behind because then we can skip through um, breaks and that kind of stuff. So it's okay if we start a little bit behind. I didn't even know there was a Justice for John O'Keefe Facebook page. I'm gonna have to go look at that. Yeah, that was it. Investigate. I couldn't remember what he'd said, but yeah, that was like his way of getting around not having a private investigator's license. Investigation consultant. Wait a minute. Hang on. Okay, so this what? Sarah Kaplan. I couldn't remember her first name. So this is all still outside the presence of the jury. That poor jury. I hope they're not. I'm assuming they're not making them show up every day and sit in the jury room for this stuff. I hope they said, look, you guys need to stay home while we sort something out here.
Sarah Kaplan, Saracaplan.
Thank you. You may proceed.
And you guys know how when I first start streaming, StreamYard wants to freak out on me first thing. So just hold tight while we get going.
Sarah Kaplan, Saracaplan.
Thank you. You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning,
How do you prefer to be? Miss, Ms.?
Ms.
I'm sorry?
Ms.
Miss.
Thank you.
Ms. Kaplan, what is your profession, please?
I'm an attorney,
And how long have you been an attorney?
25 years,
And do you have a specialty that you practice?
criminal defense.
And have you always been a defense attorney from
Yes, I
the day that you?
Sorry.
I know, you're a little nervous?
I'm also a lawyer, so it's.
Pull that on. We'll just run underneath your chair. There you go. Thanks.
Had some issues with, so let me finish. I'll let you. Since you started practicing law
Yes,
in private practice.
Yeah.
Directing your attention back to February, in particularly February 3rd and 4th of the year 2003. At that time, were you working either for another attorney or with another attorney?
yes.
Would you please tell the court who that was?
Robert,
And your offices were in Central, is that correct?
correct.
And on February 3rd and February 4th, were you working on behalf of a particular client?
Yes,
And was that Mr. Philip Spector?
yes.
As a result of employment of you and Mr. Shapiro, did you go somewhere on the evening of February 4th?
Yes, I don't recall the date specifically, but if that's the date, then yes, we did go there.
Maybe I can help you this way. Would have it been approximately a day after the time that Mr. Spector had been arrested and charged with? Okay. And did you go to 1700 Grandview, Alhambra, otherwise known as the Pyrenees Castle?
Correct.
Okay. And did you go there in the capacity as one of Mr. Spector's attorneys
Yes,
and as part of the defense team?
yes.
And how did you get there?
By car,
Did you drive your own vehicle or were you in the company of others?
I drove my own vehicle, but I believe other people were also with me.
Okay. Do you remember who that was?
No,
And when you arrived at the location, did you enter the premises?
yes.
And can you just tell us generally, I know it was a while ago, approximately how long were you on the premises that evening?
Till quite late. We weren't given access to the premises until it was dark already. And I think I left around 11:30, actually.
At night?
Yes,
And what time do you think you arrived there, just approximately?
probably around between 7 and 8, I'm guessing.
Okay, so you were there for a number of hours.
Yes,
And during that time, were you functioning, let me withdraw that and rephrase it. During the entire time that you were at the castle, were you functioning as one of Mr. Spector's lawyers?
yes.
At that time, how long had you been a criminal defense lawyer?
20 years approximately.
And from 0 to 20 years, had you handled hundreds, thousands of criminal cases,
Correct,
many murder cases?
correct.
You understood your obligations both professionally as well as ethically in terms of when you arrive at a death scene, what you can do and what you can't do. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
And you had had that experience certainly prior to February 4th of the year 2003?
Many times.
I just have a couple of quick questions. Were you familiar with the foyer area? Do you have that in your mind's eye?
Yes,
At any time during the time that you were at Mr. Spector's residence over the number of hour period, did you ever pick anything up off the floor in the foyer area?
no,
Did you ever hand anything to Dr. Henry Lee?
that would be absurd.
Did you ever hand anything to Dr. Michael Baden?
No,
I'm assuming you know who Dr. Henry Lee and Dr. Michael Baden were at that time,
I had worked with them many times before.
so you had previous familiarity with them.
Absolutely.
Okay. And you handed neither of them any object that you had picked up from the floor area or the carpet area in the foyer. Is that correct?
I would never touch an object at an alleged crime scene. ever.
Tell Judge Fuller why you wouldn't do that.
Because I've been a criminal defense attorney for 20 years at that time, and I know not to contaminate a piece of evidence. I know how to preserve something in case it's exculpatory to my client. I value my ethical responsibilities very highly.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Nothing further, Your Honor.
Thank you. People?
Just very briefly, Your Honor.
I thought I could get away. Okay.
Nice try, though.
Thanks.
It's a little different being on that side.
It is awful being honest.
I'm not going to be very long with you.
Thank you.
I'm not going to be very long with you, Ms. Kaplan.
Okay.
First of all, with whom have you had any discussions with anybody since you found out that you may be called into this case concerning this hearing?
I have discussed the matter with Mr. Hirsch, Michael Nassatir, Janet Levine, Bob Shapiro, and Mr. Rosen.
I'm going to leave your present counsel and Mr. Nassatir, your former counsel, out of this discussion and out of this question. But with regard to your discussions with Mr. Rosen and your discussions with Mr. Shapiro, can you tell us what the nature of those discussions were?
I believe I just told Mr. Rosen exactly what I testified to right now.
Did Mr. Rosen tell you that you were going to be called in because Greg Diamond had made certain accusations or allegations about conduct at the scene?
No, he did not.
Was the name Greg Diamond ever mentioned to you?
I heard it, yes. I heard that was somehow related to the reason for this.
How did you know that, in other words, how did you glean that information that Greg Diamond may be a part of this hearing?
I read it in the paper this morning as well.
Okay. When Mr. Rosen asked you to join us, either yesterday or today, because I noticed, I think you were here yesterday as well?
Yes, I
Okay,
was.
sorry for the inconvenience. Did Mr. Rosen explain to you anything about the specific nature of why you were going to be called?
No,
Just that,
generally, yes.
tell me generally what he said.
He said, do you recall what happened that evening? Do you recall who was there? And what did you do?
Okay. When you spoke with Mr. Shapiro, was the nature of the conversation basically the same, that you were discussing that evening why you were there, who was there, and what happened in the foyer area?
I recall I just called him and I said, I was served with this subpoena. Do you know what this is about? And he generally told me what it was. And we both recalled what had happened. And he claimed that he dealt with this a few years ago when there was a motion in Alhambra, and that's what happened.
Was the name Greg Diamond mentioned during your and Mr. Shapiro's conversation?
No,
Nothing came up about Greg Diamond whatsoever
correct.
in your conversations with him. Did anything come up in your conversations with Mr. Shapiro about a potential object that may or may not have been discovered at the scene by the defense team?
Yes,
What was discussed in that regard?
what the allegations have been, how this object was retrieved and by whom and what happened with it.
And what was your understanding based on that conversation of what the allegations were, to use your word?
That I had somehow picked up some piece of evidence and passed it off to somebody, and then they don't know what happened to it.
Okay. Were you told by Mr. Shapiro who was leveling this claim or this allegation?
Not that I recall.
Okay. So the name Greg Diamond was not associated with that particular, as the witness who saw this?
Correct.
Okay. What time did you get to the scene, Ms. Kaplan?
I don't remember exactly, but it was dark.
Oh, it was already dark out?
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm assuming, I know you probably don't have the date handy right on the top of your head. It would be the 4th of February, 2003. Does that sound right?
I don't remember the date, but if that's what you've determined it is, then I'll agree with you.
Well, let me put it this way. Was it the day after the killing occurred, or
I believe it
the
was
death
the
occurred?
evening after.
The evening after?
Yeah.
All right. Who did you go to the crime scene with?
I don't remember who I particularly drove there with.
Do you remember that there was another passenger with you that you gave a lift to?
There may have been one or more.
is it conceivable in your mind as you sit here today that that passenger could have been Greg Diamond?
It's possible, but I honestly don't remember.
Do you remember why Greg Diamond was called to go to the crime scene in general? Did you call him? Did Mr. Shapiro call him, or do you know?
I didn't call him, but he had been a law clerk. He worked with us.
Okay. You worked for Robert Shapiro in your capacity as a licensed attorney in this jurisdiction, correct?
Correct.
Did Mr. Shapiro ask you to join him at the scene in your capacity as a lawyer or simply an observer?
As a lawyer,
All right. Were you specifically told that your, how can I put this, your lawyering skills would be utilized at the crime scene or after the crime scene or during court case?
and no other reason for him to call me.
Only in your capacity as a lawyer, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Mr. Diamond, you understand, was not a lawyer. Is that right?
As far as I know, that he's still not.
And as far as you know, he was taking the bar at that time, correct?
Correct. And I don't think he passed it either, but
Notwithstanding that, the answer to my question is you believe he was in the process of taking the bar or studying for the bar.
that's what he said, yes.
Okay. So he was not employed full-time as an attorney for Mr. Shapiro. Is that correct?
I have no idea who hired.
Mr. Diamond was brought along simply to watch or observe.
There's no foundation.
Sustain.
What was your understanding of what your duties were at the scene? And I don't want, Ms. Kaplan, I'm going to be very careful here, anticipating the defense's concerns. I do not want you to repeat any conversations that you had with Mr. Shapiro, any of the experts, any of the defense investigators, okay? I don't want conversations. What I would, Hank, let me finish my question, then you can inquire. All I want to know is, what was your understanding of your duties at the crime scene?
You know, I think there's a better way. You may, of course, Mr. Hirsch, if I rephrase the question, did you believe you were there in a privileged capacity?
Yes.
All right.
Thank you.
All right.
What was your understanding of the duties that Greg Diamond may have had?
You know what? It's not controlling her. At the bottom line, if she didn't bring him there, if she didn't direct him to be there, he's indicated why he thought he was there. I think Mr. Shapiro is the appropriate person to inquire.
I'm simply, if the court's satisfied, I want to make sure that the court's satisfied that he was not working for Ms. Kaplan.
I'm satisfied
Okay.
he's not working for Ms. Kaplan.
Then I'll move off.
All right.
See how easy that is, Ms. Kaplan?
For you.
Good point. Ms. Kaplan, I'm going to ask you a series of questions. They're going to sound very similar to Mr. Rosen's questions. I just need to go over them very briefly again. Did anyone at the scene in your presence manipulate any object that could reasonably be described as a physical item of potential evidence?
I wouldn't make that assessment. It's not my job.
Okay. Let me narrow my question a little bit based on that answer. In your presence, did you see anyone manipulate a small white object either on the ground or in their hand or otherwise?
Yes.
Okay. Could you describe that for me, please?
Describe how they did it or the object?
Describe who did it and what the object was or your understanding of the description of the object.
I had no understanding of what it was. I'm not a criminologist. I was looking around. I saw a few areas that I thought might be interesting. There were some on the wall. It was all in the foyer.
In the foyer. Okay, go ahead.
And I showed a few to Henry. He had a huge floodlight set up in his work area. He had rubber gloves on. He had a tweezer. And he said, might be interesting. Picked it up and put it in a plastic vial. And that's the last I saw of that.
What did that item look like?
Just a little white thing. I didn't know what it was.
I'm sorry to tax your memory, Ms. Kaplan. A little white thing about
The size of my fingernail, perhaps.
the size of your fingernail? You're holding up your right thumbnail?
Yeah,
Okay.
about that big.
what is your best description of it other than white thing? That's
It was flat with uneven edges. That's all I remember.
Flat with uneven edges.
Uneven edges, yeah.
Did it appear to be a solid object as opposed to liquid object?
Solid.
Okay. What did you see Dr. Lee do with this item when he picked it up?
Picked up scissors, he put into it.
Like Miss Lynn?
A little container with a lid.
I'm holding a red pin up that's cylindrical and maybe 6 inches in height. I've seen vials that look sort of like this. Is this what you're describing, or is?
Yeah, something like that.
Okay, so a glass vial with maybe a little rubber stopper that goes in the top?
Correct.
What did you see Mr. Lee do, Dr. Lee, do with this glass vial?
Did with it.
Okay.
I was moving on.
I'm going to ask you more specifically, do you recall where in the foyer that was recovered from?
No.
Let me, you may not be able to answer this, Ms. Kaplan, just give me a quick second.
While you're doing that, I just need to make an inquiry of my staff. How much longer do you plan on being? I'm not trying to limit you in any way. I simply wish to know how long it's going to be.
I understand. I'm sorry. I didn't even notice the time. I
It's all right.
apologize. I'm sorry,
No.
you too.
I'm trying to accommodate the witness, Mr. Hirsch, everybody.
Based on the answers that we've just gotten, I expect the inquiry to go a little bit further than I first expected. Maybe another 15 minutes, 10 minutes.
And then we're going to have more time from the defense team.
I expect we will.
How's your schedule today? Tell me.
It's fine.
Mr. Hirsch, how about you?
It's up to you, Your Honor.
Well, in that case, we'll be seeing you at 1:30.
I did.
All right.
I expected the same.
We're in recess until 1:30 this afternoon. Thank you. Ms. Kaplan, you're not to discuss this case except with Mr. Hirsch, members of the prosecution team, or members of the defense team. Thank you. All right, back on the record, the parties are present as heretofore. Would you take the witness stand again, please? And you remain under oath, and you may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. I just have a few more questions for you, Ms. Kaplan. Thank you for joining us again this afternoon. Before we left off, you had just described Dr. Henry Lee placing a small white object into a glass vial that you described being about the size of this red pen, which I've described for the record as being maybe an inch in diameter and 6 or 7 inches in height and cylindrical. Is that fairly accurate?
I didn't say it was glass. You did. It was a clear vial. I don't know what it was made out of.
Okay, some kind of a material that you could see through, either plastic or glass?
Yes.
Okay. I know you probably weren't looking at your watch. About time, when you got there at time 0, about what time did you witness this recovery take place? In other words, an hour into the being at the scene, 2 hours, 10 minutes.
I don't.
That it was close to the end of the session, if you will, or closer to the beginning of the session when you saw Dr. Lee recover this item?
I don't recall.
Okay. What did you see Dr. Lee do with that vial once it had the white object in it? And I'm assuming it was then corked or closed?
I didn't watch him do anything with it. I went on to do something else.
Okay. Who was the last person you saw in possession of that white object that you've described for us?
Dr. Lee.
Who else was present when you saw Dr. Lee make this recovery?
I wasn't paying attention to who else was present.
Well, let me ask it this way then. Were there other people present?
I don't know.
Okay. Specifically, was Dr. Bodden in the room or the foyer area at the time that Dr. Lee made this recovery?
No.
How can you be so certain if you just indicated that you don't remember who was there?
because Dr. Bodden is big and tall, and I know him, and I would have remembered his presence.
So you can state with certainty that Dr. Bodden wasn't there, but
Correct.
you can't state with certainty who else was there.
Correct.
Was Stan White there?
To my best recollection, he was outside.
Outside at the time?
Correct.
Once again, I'm going to ask you the same question, Ms. Kaplan. If you're not sure who was there, how do you know that Stan White wasn't there?
Because I believe he was asked to secure the.
Okay. Is it possible that it could have been Mr. Pavlik? Mr. Pavlik.
I understand that, but it may jog your memory all out. You may answer the question.
And I would, they had a few people out there.
Okay, so you're, based on, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but based on that answer, it sounds like you're assuming because all three of them were investigators rather than experts or lawyers, they might have been outside for the whole of the time that you were at the location?
I'm more than assuming because I know it was a concern, even when we got there, that other people might come onto the property.
Do you know Mr. Pavlik's son?
I do,
Is his name Ante Pavlik?
yes.
Okay. Was Ante Pavlik ever in your presence inside the foyer area?
Not that I recall.
Was
at all.
Bill Pavlik ever in your presence inside the foyer area?
I don't recall.
Was Stan White ever in your presence inside the foyer area?
No.
You can specifically say Stan White never walked into the foyer?
I know he was asked to be outside.
Okay. Just a second ago, you indicated that you assumed he was outside because of security concerns.
I said I more than assumed it.
Okay. Tell me your level of certainty that Stan White specifically never made his way into the foyer area.
I heard him being told to go outside and secure the perimeter of the premises.
And where was he when you heard him being given this order?
He was still outside. I don't recall him coming inside.
So you
When
remember,
I was there that night.
I'm sorry?
When I was there that night, I don't recall being inside with him.
Okay. Was there ever a time, Ms. Kaplan, when you had made your way from the foyer area, say, into the living room, into to the upstairs portion of the house or any other portion of the house outside of the foyer?
Can you say that again?
Certainly. Was there any time during the 3 hours that you estimate that you were at that residence that you made your way out of the foyer area into other parts of the house?
I need to consult with my attorney.
Of course.
Yes.
It's not up to me. It's up to
No,
the
I
judge.
don't have a problem with that. You may.
Yes.
Okay. How many times did you venture out of the foyer area?
I don't recall.
Did you venture out of the foyer area to an extent that you were out of the line of sight of the foyer? In other words, into another room, like for instance.
Yes,
Okay. So there were times when you were out of the foyer area when others were in the foyer area and you might not know who was there or what they were doing, correct?
if I was out of the foyer area, I didn't know if there was anyone in the foyer area because I wasn't there.
Perfect. So my point is, there were times when you cannot account for who was in or out of the foyer area, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Did you ever take possession of the vial containing the white object
Never,
at any point, either at the scene or subsequent to it?
never.
Never. And I think I may have asked you this, Ms. Kaplan. If I did, please bear with me. I simply can't remember. Who was the very last person? Well, let me ask it this way. When was the last time you ever saw that vial with the white object?
Actually, it has been asked and answered, but
I'm going to allow it.
That day that I was there, that
Okay.
evening,
Specifically, in whose possession was it?
Dr. Lee.
Thank you. That's all I have, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rosen?
I want to say briefly, but anytime a lawyer says that, it's dangerous. Ms. Kaplan, just a few questions, I hope. If in the foyer area on that evening, would that be an untruth?
Yes, it would.
And as I understand it, the only person that entire evening that had possession of that object, that little white object, whatever it was Dr. Lee. Is that correct?
Correct.
No other person, right?
Correct.
You indicated that Mr. White was directed and instructed to secure the perimeter area outside. Is that right?
Yes,
And was your understanding that that was done was it correct that that was done before Dr. Lee picked up this object?
yes,
Okay. And finally, as part of the defense team, was it your understanding that the reason that Mr. White was told to secure the perimeter area was to make it private so that the defense team could do its work?
correct.
To preserve the integrity of the defense developing whatever was going to be developed at that time. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Court's indulgence for a moment.
Of course.
Mr. Plort has asked me to inquire just in one other further area. You said that you pointed some areas out to Henry Lee. Is that correct?
Yes,
And I think you said in your direct examination that some of the areas you had pointed out to him were on a wall. Is that correct?
correct.
The wall in the foyer
Yes,
over by the stairs?
correct.
What did it look like to you?
Blood.
Thank you very much. Nothing further.
Thank you. Anything further?
Did you, from your testimony this morning until this afternoon, did you speak with anybody regarding your testimony over the lunch hour?
Only my attorney.
With the exception of your attorney, did you speak with Mr. Rosen or any member of the defense team about your testimony this morning or what your anticipated testimony may be this afternoon?
No,
Before you left the location that day, Ms. Kaplan, did you discuss with Robert Shapiro, and keep in mind the narrow scope of my question, did you discuss the subject matter of the white object with Robert Shapiro?
no,
That never came up?
correct.
Did you at any subsequent time discuss the subject matter of the white object that Dr. Henry Lee recovered with Robert Shapiro?
Your Honor, I'm going to object to this line of questions. Beyond the scope of the redirect, I was very tight and narrow on my redirect.
I'll allow the district attorney to reopen if it is. A chance to consult with the
I will object that it covers the area of the client privilege.
Well, may or may not. The problem is if it deals with any kind, and I use the word in the broadest sense, manipulation of evidence, that's not privilege. That's why we're here. And that's a consideration. If you want to go in camera, I can certainly offer you that if there's a concern about that.
Yes, it's important.
That's suspicious.
Reread, Your Honor.
Certainly. Or you can re-ask it or it can be reread. What would you prefer?
If we can reread it,
All right.
consistent.
Anytime somebody on the stand asks for a lawyer, that's just
Don't be suspicious. No, don't be suspicious. 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 Don't be suspicious.
John Ralphio?
Kom, je dikke stem is op! Kom erop, man! Je dikke stem is op! Je dikke stem is op!
Did you at any subsequent time discuss the subject matter of the white object that Dr. Henry Lee recovered with Robert Shapiro?
I'm sure at some time we discussed it. We would never discuss manipulating evidence. Bob is one of the most ethical attorneys.
That's not
That
the
wasn't my
point.
question.
And that's not the point I was making. I was getting into whether or not a conversation might be privileged. Why don't you re-ask the
Sure.
question?
All I'm asking is, nobody's casting aspersions on anyone, okay? All I'm asking is for information. Did the subject matter of the white object that was recovered by Dr. Lee ever come up between yourself and Robert Shapiro at any time subsequent to your leaving the crime scene?
Perhaps. I'm sure it has, yes.
Okay, that's all I have.
Thank you. Anything further from the defense?
Just to ask that this witness be excused, Your Honor, please.
Well, it should be excused subject to recall. I don't know where this hearing is
I
going.
understand.
So with that understanding, you may sit down. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hirsch.
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, before the next witness, may I have a moment with Mr. Hirsch just to make arrangements?
You may.
Thanks.
That's hilarious. Because he's sick of soup. Oh, come on, StreamYard. You were doing so good. You always do this when it switches to the next video.
I understand the court's position. We're not, we don't feel that there's a motion that the people have formally made at this point, but we're going to submit it. Where if they want to call witnesses and the court allows them, we're here.
I believe the court has an absolute obligation when there is any inference or allegation that potential evidence has been tampered with to make an inquiry. So the court has an independent duty to do that when it's put in front of the court, as it has in the matter concerning the tooth. As an offshoot of that, this fingernail or alleged fingernail evidence is a part of that, although it is indirect and perhaps it did not start there. We now have to continue to guarantee the sanctity of any evidence or lack of evidence that is presented to the court. So we're going to proceed, and the people actually refile their motion that was or did you or did you not?
No, Judge, I gave you a courtesy copy.
I'm
Nothing's been refiled.
All right, well then I'll proceed and we'll call it a court's inquiry.
Right, and that's what I wanted to clear up. But Mr. Plord has continually referred to this as the people's theory and the people's position, and the people are fronting certain things. As an officer of the court, I believe it's incumbent upon all of us to make witnesses available to satisfy the court's inquiry. That's why we subpoenaed those that we have, and Stan White is just among them. He's not my witness, he's not their witness, he's just a witness.
I agree, though, however, you have, and just for the record, since you filed a motion and you did not specify this particular evidence about possible defense violations of discovery, this is clearly contained within that, although not specifically enumerated.
Absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely.
We'll proceed.
I understand the court's ruling.
All right, thank you.
Next witness, Stan White.
I don't hear.
Would you please state and spell your name for the record?
Stanley Allen White, A-L-L-E-N for Allen, common spelling for White.
Thank you. You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Mr. White.
How are you?
Good. Do you have a background in law enforcement?
Yes, sir, I do.
Could you briefly explain that?
I am a sergeant in Los Angeles in December of 1966. I retired in March of 2000. I spent 25 years in the Detective Bureau, approximately 5 years working undercover narcotics, 20 years assigned to the Homicide Bureau, and then the typical jail patrol time, academy, so forth.
So according to your last answer, you spent 20 years in Sheriff's Homicide Bureau?
Yes, I did.
And during that period of time, I'm sure you worked on, investigated hundreds, maybe even more, of murder cases.
That's true.
And in investigating those murder cases from time to time, I'm sure you attended autopsies.
On just about every one of them.
You're familiar with evidence, bullets, knives, any kind of instrument to commit a murder, correct?
That is correct, sir.
And as a sheriff's homicide detective, you would also, in all those cases, look for evidence that would help you solve the case.
Yes. As a homicide investigator, your primary function is that you're the main case agent. So at the end of the day, you're responsible for everybody that's involved in a homicide. You prepare the reports, and then we submit them to the district attorney's office for prosecution.
Fine. So that you investigating those homicides are aware of all the evidence help or hurt an investigation or help solve a case or exonerate some, correct?
That is correct.
All right.
I'm going to allow it. The answer will stand.
At some point, did you retire from the sheriff's department?
Yes.
When was that?
That was, I believe, the 22nd or the 23rd of March, 2000.
What did you do after that?
Well, I've done a lot of things. I spent a year and a half in Iraq. I've curried diamonds. I've worked as a private investigator. I've broke mules, you name it. Jack of all trades.
Let's talk about the private investigator. Are you licensed?
Yes, I am.
Now I'd like to invite your attention to February 4th of 2003. On that date or just prior to that date, did you hear that there had been perhaps a homicide at Phil Spector's house?
On 2003?
Yes, in February.
Yes, I heard it on the radio.
And as a result of that, and I'd like to be given some leeway to lead here to avoid.
Go ahead. Let's see where it goes.
All right. As a result of that, contact Bob.
Wait, why did he ask 2003? Was there more than one homicide at Phil Spector's house? That was odd.
And in that conversation, did you offer him your services as a private investigator?
Yes, I did.
You were retained?
I was.
And then as a result of that, on February 4th, 2003, did you go to a residence that you believe to be Phil Spector's home at 1700 Grandview in Alhambra?
I did, sir.
About what time did you arrive?
I believe we got there somewhere around 8:30 or 9 o'clock. It was right after dark.
When you, in your last answer, you said we. Who else went there with you?
There were about somewhere between 10 and 13 there. I'll start with myself. There was myself. There was Bob Shapiro, Sarah Kaplan, Pavlik, Pavlik's son.
So that would have been.
Or he might have already been there. There were two other kids. There were two kids there. Dr. Henry Lee, Dr. Michael Bodden. Who am I leaving out?
Well, let me ask you another question. You mentioned Pavlik. Would that be Bill Pavlik or William Pavlik? Bill Pavlik?
Bill Pavlik, yes, sir.
Also a private, some kind of investigative consultant to your knowledge?
Yeah, he's a private investigator, counsel.
Okay. And you said his son. Did you know his son's first name?
Ante, A-N-T-E.
And in your last answer, I think you indicated you're not sure whether they arrived about the same time you did.
I believe they were.
We can't both talk at the same time. Let me finish my question. Or do you believe that they were there when you arrived?
I believe they were there when the morning about it.
So it was getting to be dark when you arrived?
As I remember, correct, sir.
And this would have been February, so sunset around 5 o'clock or so, maybe.
Well, excuse me, let me just quote the witness. He said, we arrived around 8:30 to 9, right
The
after.
objection is sustained. You may rephrase it.
What's your best estimate?
Let me correct myself then. It was somewhere between 5 and 7. I remember that I was following Shapiro in my vehicle, and it was dark. And I got the impression that it was, remember, I believe I testified it was sundown.
Okay, thank you. And 5 and 7 p.m., of course.
Somewhere in there, yes.
When you arrived, were you detailed to any specific duties?
No, what was going on was,
The answer is, the question has been answered. You may ask another question.
What happened? What did you do after you arrived?
well, we waited because it was a transfer.
Just a second. I believe, was the question what happened next, or what did you do then?
Yes, what did you do?
The objection is overruled.
Please continue.
We waited. What we were doing is that Sheriff's Homicide was handing the crime scene over to Bob Shapiro and his defense team.
As a Sheriff's Homicide detective, before you retired, did you ever engage in that kind of situation?
Actually, no.
Objection, not responsive.
Yeah, it's about to become. The question's been answered with a no. You may proceed.
So when you first arrived there were members of the LA Sheriff's Department there?
Yes, there were.
Let me ask you if you know Mark Lilienfield.
Very well.
To your knowledge, on that date, was he a member of Sheriff's Homicide?
Oh, yes, he was.
Did you see him there?
Of course.
Did you have a conversation?
Yes.
Without telling us what it was? Is he a friend of yours?
A dear friend of mine.
So it was a hello, how are you doing? What are you doing here kind of thing?
Yes, it was more like, what the hell are you doing here, meaning me?
At some point after that conversation, did the members of the Sheriff's Department leave Phil Spector's house and turn the crime scene or death scene, depending on how we look at it, over to Bob Shapiro and his defense team?
Yes, sir.
What did you do after that?
I started doing what I call my cursory walk around, and that's a big place. So I just walked around and looked outside, inside, the outbuildings, and so forth.
To the best of your recollection, in the first half hour or so, were you inside or outside?
I walked in. I determined in my mind that the crime scene was downstairs in the foyer.
It's explaining what he did and why. The objection is overruled. You may proceed.
Once I determined that, then I went outside to get a feel for the grounds.
And after that, did you return to the inside of the home?
Yes, I did.
At some point that evening, while you were at Phil Spector's home, did you see what you believed to be a piece of evidence?
I think I know where you're going, counsel. The answer is yes.
What did you see?
I assume I'm looking at what's in Henry Lee's hand, correct?
Well, no, tell me, at some point, did you see? Let me
explain, Your Honor.
Just hold on a second. Let's listen to Mr. Dixon's questions.
At some point while you were at Phil Spector's home, did you see a small piece of evidence that you noticed in someone's hands?
Correct.
Please explain that.
I was cutting out a piece of carpet in the foyer with the victim's blood on it. And I heard Dr. Henry Lee state, I think I found some tissue. I was maybe 6 to 8 feet from him. I looked up and I saw him holding either a white tissue paper or a napkin or a handkerchief. I didn't pay any attention. So I got up, I had my flashlight with me. I walked over to him. I shined my flashlight on the object. I looked at it and I said it looked like a piece of fingernail. Dr. Lee said to me, "You're crazy." I said to Dr. Lee, "You need glasses." And I turned around and went back to my duty.
could you describe in any great detail this fingernail or part of the fingernail that you saw Dr. Lee holding?
Yes.
Was he holding it?
It was, yes, it was, it's only got two hands, so it was in his hand in a handkerchief or a tissue paper. It was white.
Because Gregory Diamond said that they hid it from the prosecution because apparently they were trying to say it was a self-inflicted wound, that she put it in her mouth and closed her lips around it so that there would not have been any teeth that would have been out. It would have all stayed in. But if someone did it to her, she would have been fighting and her lips would have been open and that fragments would have gone all over the place. And that Phil Spector cleaned up the scene afterwards. Remember, they found the cloth diaper with the blood on it and stuff like that. And apparently there were tooth shards, and there was that one that he didn't find to clean up and get rid of. So they found one after the scene was released to the defense team that I guess got missed whenever the cops were investigating, and supposedly they hid it from the prosecution. And Gregory Diamond went to the DA and the New York Times and the LA Times and the Smoking Gun, and then they subpoenaed him to come testify, and then he didn't want to testify. So now they're having this hearing about whether or not it actually happened and whether it should be, I guess, discoverable material for the trial. I don't know. I think that's what's happening. I know. I don't know why they're making such a big deal out of one little bitty piece of tooth. Unless they're just trying to prove that there's shadiness going on. I'm not exactly sure.
And the tissue paper was white. So I looked at it, and what I saw was a small object that perhaps 1/4 of an inch, 3/16, and about a 1/16 inch thick, and it was red. I could also see what I thought was lying, and then at the same time, I saw what I thought in my mind, because I've seen it before, soft lead transfer. So when I looked at it, I determined in my mind that it was a fingernail.
And you expressed that view to Dr. Lee?
Yes.
And he said what you've told in response, correct?
Correct.
And then you said you're the one that needs glasses or something like that.
That is correct.
Okay. What did you see? What happened next to what you believe was a fingernail? What happened?
These kind of items are common in crime scenes. So I wasn't paying.
This is non-responsive. Just what did you do next?
I went back to cutting out the bloody carpet.
Did you see what happened to the fingernail next? Do you know what happened to it?
I know it was left in Dr. Lee's hands. I also know he was shown to other people.
Describe that, please. Expand on that if you could.
Well, I know this through my peripheral vision, but I saw other people walking up and looking at it.
Was Dr. Lee holding it as these people?
Yes, he was holding it like you hold a piece of evidence in your hand. So very carefully so not to drop it.
Now, you've told us quite a long list of people that you believe were at Phil Spector's house that evening. Can you tell us can you tell us who, to the best of your recollection, looked at that piece of evidence, that fingernail?
I believe they all looked at it, to be quite frank, but I was not paying attention. But I was aware that people were looking at that evidence.
Let me ask you a few more questions about the piece of evidence. First, I think you mentioned bullet white, is that correct?
I bet.
Bullet white? Or what you thought was a lead white on the?
Yes. With soft lead bullets, especially from revolvers, sometimes when they hit hard objects, that soft lead will stick to an object. And that's what I thought it was.
In your 20 years as a homicide detective for the sheriff's department, had you ever seen anything like that before?
Many times.
Tens? Hundreds?
Well, between most of your homicides are gunshots when you get right down to it.
I think he's trying to give us an approximation.
Exactly. And the reality of it is in the mind of a homicide investigator, when you're looking at body parts and tissue, you don't look at it as evidence the way we would look at a bullet or a gun, because it belongs to the coroner. You can't pick it up, you can't mark it, you can't put it in a bag, and you can't send it to the crime lab. So once it goes off in your mind that you're looking at human tissue, bone, skull, meat, it's not yours. So that's the reason I didn't pay a lot of attention to it. And I didn't think it was that valuable at the time, to be honest with you. This is so common to find body parts at crime scenes that it's just become an industry for private industry now to clean up after murder cases.
Did you have any doubt in your mind that what you saw was this lead wipe on the fingernail?
It looked like it. I never picked it up. I never gave it a very hard examination.
Well, describe to us, if you could, how you did look at it. You said you had a flashlight. How close did you get to it?
I walked up. May I stand?
Yes.
I walked up. The man is holding it like this in his hand. And so I'm right here where the court reporter is. Tall, right?
Indicating his left hand cupped upwards.
I looked at it, shined my flashlight in it, saw a fingernail, no big deal. You see them all the time in murder scenes. And said it looks like a fingernail because he said tissue. I thought that he had a piece of meat.
Do you have any doubt that what you saw was a fingernail? Are you sure of that?
It was a fingernail. I believe it to be a fingernail.
And you've seen, not only in your personal life, but investigating homicide crime scenes, you've seen fingernails often. Isn't that correct?
Fingernails and fingers are common in murder scenes because people in defense wounds will lift their hands, whether they're being shot at, being battered, being stabbed, and the hands always take a beating. And I just thought it was like one of many, that it was the detritus, sorry, but this is the way we talk, the detritus of a defense wound that was not recovered by the coroner's office.
Could I have just a moment?
Yes.
May I continue?
Yes, you may.
Thank you. As you've told us, at this time you were retired, but a former member, let me withdraw. I'll start out a little louder. As you've told us, at the time you were at Phil Spector's house, you were retired, but you were a former member of the Sheriff's Homicide Bureau, correct?
Yes, sir.
July 2nd, 2003, did you go to an event, the 80th birthday party, for a better word, for the Sheriff's Homicide Bureau?
Yes, I did. It was the 80th anniversary of the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Homicide Bureau at Star Center in Whittier.
Active and retired homicide detectives there, correct?
Yes.
And among those people, did you see Mark Lilienfield?
Yes, I did.
I'm just going to ask you a few specific questions, so please listen closely. During that barbecue, did you have a conversation with Mark Lilienfield?
Yes, I did.
And in that conversation, draw that and first ask you this. Was it your understanding that Mark Lilienfield was in charge of the crime scene at the Phil Spector home or just present?
No, it was my impression that he was mentoring the investigation, not in charge of it.
All right.
One of the policies of
Well, I think that's
Okay.
you've answered. Okay. But because of his presence at the crime scene, did you indicate to him that you believe that they'd left a piece of evidence behind at the crime scene?
I did not initiate it that way.
At some
I
point,
asked a question.
right? But at some point, you told him that. Is that correct?
Objection leading, Your Honor.
Well, I'm going to allow it.
You asked the question again because
During your conversation with Mark Lilienfield, at some point did you indicate to him that you believe that the sheriff's department had left a piece of evidence behind its Spector crime scene?
yes,
And did you tell him what you thought that evidence was? What you've told us, the fingernail with the bullet wipe?
Objection. This case is testimony leading.
I don't believe it does. And even if it may be leading, just so we get focused, I'm going to allow it. Did you have that conversation?
I never framed it. I want to go where you want to take me, but I never framed it that way. At the end of the day, we got to that conclusion.
Through your conversation?
Pardon me?
As a result of your conversation?
Yes,
So at the end of the day, so to speak, that's exactly what you indicated?
correct, sir.
Well, Your Honor, I'm going to object. We got to,
If you want to follow up and cross, the bottom line is that the information was passed along. That's the only import that I'm giving it.
Thank you.
Before the defense crosses, there's something I have to clarify because I want to make sure I understand.
Okay.
You've used the word tissue, and then you've talked about Dr. Lee having a piece of tissue. Was this an item contained within a piece of tissue? Is that what you said?
No, Your Honor, Dr. Lee said he found a piece of tissue.
Okay.
So when I got up to look at it, I was expecting to see, in my mind, meat, flesh. When I looked up, I saw a fingernail.
It was in his hand. Was his hand gloved?
No, he had a handkerchief over it.
That's what I was trying to go. So this object was contained
Why?
within a handkerchief.
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you. You may proceed.
Okay.
Good afternoon,
How are you?
Mr. White. I wanted to ask you a few questions here. Today, did you talk to anybody in the district attorney's office about this subject that you're testifying about? Mr. Ocampo?
Yeah, you're talking about what we just talked about?
Yeah, this observing this object in the hand of Dr. Lee.
Yes.
Okay, was it a Mr. Ocampo, the one that was there talking with you, or was it somebody else?
Can you show me who Mr. Ocampo is?
Yes.
Was it this gentleman here? Mr. Wiley?
Yes, Ed Wiley. Now we've got it.
Okay. And the reason I'm asking is that he took some notes, and I want to ask you about some of the statements that you were making to Mr. Wiley. Who else was present other than Mr. Wiley, this gentleman you've identified?
At that time, when we first sat down to talk, it was only Mr. Wiley and then later Mr. Dixon.
Okay. And when you were talking to him, he asked you questions about this observation of Dr. Lee that you made. Is that correct?
Not exactly.
Okay.
What he wanted to do was go over with me the statement, and he read it to me and asked me if it was correct that
What
Mark
statement?
Lilienfield had made.
Okay. And you mean, did he read a statement purportedly by Mr. Lilienfield?
Yes, from an affidavit.
And then did you say it was correct or not correct?
I said that it was correct, that I was misquoted in one part.
Okay. Did you make a statement to you as far as you recall the item, referring to the item that Dr. Lee had that you looked at, you couldn't tell if it was a fingernail, polish, or tissue?
No, he might have wrote it down that way.
This is my question. Did you make that statement to him, yes or no?
No.
Okay, that's all I want to know. Okay. Did you see him taking notes of your conversation?
Yes.
Okay, did you see him write down that answer?
I wasn't paying attention, sir.
Did you Did you see Dr. Lee do anything with this item that you've talked about in your testimony after you made this observation?
I saw him showing it to other people, sir.
Okay. Now, did you see him package it up or do anything like that?
No, sir.
Did you see where Dr. Lee was when he was holding it? In other words, what area of the home
It
or?
was in, excuse me. Just so I'm not trying to be rude, but I read a little bit of your lips, so sometimes I will override you if I think you're done. So I apologize. He was standing in the foyer with his back to the stair landing that goes upstairs.
Okay. I want to show you some photographs. Showing you the photograph. We'll mark this next in order.
Course 4.
Do you see this photograph that I put on the Elmo here?
Yes.
Okay, and do you see the bottom of the stairway?
Yes.
Was he around in front of the stairs when you saw
No.
this? Where was he at?
You see the evidence marker number 5?
See that?
He was midway between number 5 and the, what is that thing?
We'll call that the pedestal.
The pedestal. Thank you.
Okay. And where were you at?
You see where the feet are?
I see that.
And whatever that white dot is that's north of the feet, I was back farther where the victim's head would be from relation to her feet.
Okay. And Dr. Lee had this object in some type of a white handkerchief, is your recollection?
Tissue or handkerchief? Yes, sir.
Okay, tissue paper.
Yes.
But the object was on top of that, as I understand.
Of course.
Now, when you looked at it, Dr. Lee, did you ever tell him that, or did you ever say anything to anybody regarding this object that Dr. Lee told you that he found some blood or tissue, using the word blood and tissue as being a statement that Dr. Lee made?
The only thing that Dr. Lee said was tissue. Or he might have said blood and tissue, but I remember it is tissue. I remember in my mind, I was walking up there to see a piece of human flesh.
Did you ever know a person by the name of Sortino related to this case? A deputy DA by the name of
Yes,
Sortino?
Doug Sortino.
Did you ever have a conversation with him regarding your observation of what Dr. Lee was holding?
Yes.
Did you ever tell anybody that you told Sortino that Dr. Lee claimed he found some blood or tissue at the crime scene?
I might have said that, yes.
Okay, and did you say that to Mr. Sortino? Do you recall having a conversation on this subject to that effect?
The answer is yes. I remember it better now. Is tissue. He might have said blood or tissue. At the end of the day, it was tissue that I'm going to stick with right now.
Okay, but in the past, you've described it as blood and tissue, is that correct?
In all fairness to Mr. Sortino, I might have.
Okay. Do you remember speaking with a person by the name of William Gailey about this subject when it was raised at an earlier time a couple of years ago?
William Gailey?
Mm-hmm.
Is this Leslie Abramson's private investigator?
I believe so.
I never met the man face to face. We talked on the phone.
Okay. And did you talk about this subject?
I asked him to come down and debrief me that I had valuable information for him, that which would be very beneficial to the defense case, as I recall. The bottom line is we talked, kidded, and I didn't hear from anybody.
Okay. Did you ever telephone Deputy District Attorney Sortino to talk about what you observed in Dr. Lee's hand?
No, they sought me out, sir.
Okay. Did you ever tell Mr. Gailey that you telephoned Deputy District Attorney Mr. Sortino?
I might have.
Okay. Was that correct or not correct?
Council, what is this, 3 years ago? I'm 62 years old.
Okay, if you don't remember, that's fine.
I don't remember if I said that or not. Possibility is that I did, but I don't know in what context it would have been said in.
Okay. But I want to now focus your attention on the contemporaneous comment that Dr. Lee made when you were both looking at this object. You said something about him needing glasses. He said, "You're crazy." In other words, you had some conversation there regarding
That's
this
what we
object.
had, sir.
Right. And did Dr. Lee, to the best of your recollection, said that he had found some blood or tissue?
I don't remember him saying anything after that. All I remember is that I thought I wasn't looking at him, sir. I told you I'm a lip reader, and I thought I heard tissue. I might have heard blood and tissue. When I looked up, he had something in his hand. I stood up, I walked over there, I shined my flashlight on it, saw a fingernail, told him it was a fingernail. He told me I was crazy. I told him he needed glasses. That was it.
Okay. Would it possibly help you refresh your recollection? Well, let me ask you this question. Do you recall telling Mr. Gailey when he talked to you in the conversation that you just recalled with him about this subject, that when you shined your flashlight on this, you thought that on this object there was either blood or fingernail polish?
Yes, because remember I testified it was red, and I couldn't tell if it was red or fingernail polish.
Okay. And when you made the statement to Dr. Lee that you thought it was a fingernail, that's when he said that you're crazy, suggesting you were mistaken. Is that correct?
No, he was suggesting I was crazy.
Okay. I would assume, Mr. White, you didn't agree with that. Is that
I
correct?
didn't know.
Then or now? Okay. Mr. White, with reference to your observation of this item, you didn't see what happened to it after you did that. You went back to what you were doing. Is that correct?
That's correct, sir.
And you were cutting out, cleaning up the scene to get rid of the debris, basically. Is that correct?
No.
What were you doing?
I was collecting evidence.
Okay, and what were you collecting? Where were you putting it?
I'm assuming, since there was no victim when I arrived at the crime scene, I looked at it. I saw where the blood had pooled, and I assumed that the woman bled out into that pool of blood.
Okay.
And that we should not leave it there for two reasons. One, it might be evidence. And two, just out of common decency and courteousness, somebody's got to pick this up and clean it. And
this is something that youth sensed was looked at, and basically they processed the scene.
Sheriff's Homicide had their shot at it. They were in there for 2 days. They left it.
Okay.
I took it.
Were you ever at this scene or area before Homicide turned it over? In other words, did you ever come and go before that period of time that you went there to do the things
You mean
testified?
beforehand?
Right.
No.
Okay. And when you arrived there, were there other people that were there?
Yes.
Okay. Were there other people from the sheriff's department other than Mr. Littlefield?
Yes.
About how many?
At that point, they were all new to me. Maybe 3 or 4.
Okay. And let me ask you this question, Mr. White. If you saw this object again, would you think you might be able to recognize it?
Yes.
Okay. Now, I want to draw back, and you were asked some questions by Mr. Dixon about this barbecue that you went to, this birthday party for the sheriff's department, and
80th anniversary.
80th anniversary. I guess that's a birthday party. You saw Littlefield there, and you started talking. There was some discussion about this item at some point in time during the discussions. Is that correct?
Yes, I initiated the conversation.
Okay. And what did you say to him that initiated the conversation?
I walked up to him, and one of the first words out of my mouth is, "When are you guys going to file this case?"
Okay. And did he start asking you questions?
No, he answered my question.
Okay. Did he ask you any questions?
Later.
Okay. Do you know what the date was of this anniversary celebration?
Yes, it was July 2nd or July 3rd of 2003.
Okay. So he told you that the case was going to be filed at some point later on?
No.
Okay. Did he say it wasn't going to be filed?
No, he gave me a stock answer of when the lab reports came back, and I told him I wasn't buying it.
Okay. Anyway, you're saying that the conversation came up later regarding this observation with Dr. Lee. Is that correct?
Yes, I asked him a question.
Okay. And did he ask you questions?
There was a lot of talk. We're talking about 30 minutes. And I was getting ready to go to Iraq, so there was a lot of talk about me leaving and going to Iraq.
Okay. After this discussion with Detective Littlefield, you went to Iraq for over a year, is that correct?
17 months, yes.
17 months. And did you ever get called and asked about this again?
Yes. My wife was contacted. The district attorney flew me from Baghdad to court on this. I believe it was concerning this. It would have been March, April, maybe May of '04.
Okay. And did you go to court?
I sure did.
Did you testify?
Nope.
Okay. Was there some type of hearing that was canceled?
Yes. I arrived in court. Bob Shapiro was there. Henry Lee was there. Leslie Abramson had the defense team then. They went back into chambers. Nobody talked to me. They came out of chambers 20 minutes later.
You know, Julie B, now that you say that, it makes me think this has to be a different fingernail. So she's got more than one broken fingernail. I don't know if that means anything. Because they knew about a broken fingernail. So if this was one that they picked up and didn't turn over, I still don't know where the tooth fragment comes in, though.
And Sorrentino told me I could go back to Iraq.
Okay. Basically, the hearing just never went forward. Is that correct?
Well, there was something that happened in chambers. The bottom line is I never gave any testimony.
Okay. Now, did you ever get interviewed by anybody else before that hearing?
That's when I believe I would have been interviewed by Sorrentino.
Okay. And when you were interviewed by Sorrentino, was that just you and him, or were there other people present?
No, standard procedure that the district attorney will have an investigator present or two.
Did you know who that investigator was?
One of them was Mark Lillienfield. The other man, I met him, and I do not recall his name, but if I saw him again, I could identify him.
Did you ever make a statement to anybody regarding this object that you saw in Dr. Lee's possession, that you saw him package it and number it or mark it up?
Never.
Do I have a minute, Your Honor?
Of course.
Yeah, did you you ever have any discussions with Mr. Spector's then attorney about this issue?
Well, it was a one-way discussion on the telephone.
Okay, and one way, in other words, you were listening to Leslie Abramson, I
That is
suppose.
correct.
Those are very common with this case.
Okay. And did you impart any information to her during this conversation?
Yes, but most of it was expletive deletive.
Okay, in other words, it was a lively conversation, in other words.
She called me at my home.
Okay. Did you ever receive any correspondence from Ms. Abramson regarding this object that you observed?
Yes, threatened to sue me.
Did she say anything outside of the object regarding, well, let me ask you this. Did you ever tell her that you saw this object in Dr. Lee's possession?
When the subject, may I relate my side of the conversation?
If it's more than a yes or no, I'll allow you to explain it. Go ahead.
Man, it was about 8:00 at night. She called me on the phone. And I heard a female voice. I said, "This is Leslie Abramson." And first words out of my mouth was, "I was wondering when you were going to get around to call me." And then she started. And I listened. And when I got a pause, I told her, "This is what Shapiro gets for hiring Dr. Lee." And that really wound her up. And basically, she swore and cussed at me for 3 straight minutes. And I just sat there listening to her, telling me she was going to sue me, that I was not to talk to anybody about this case. And at that point, I started swearing back, and she couldn't take it as long. She hung up.
You may proceed.
Mr. White, with reference to this object and your identification of it, your recollection as you sit here now that it was reddish in color, there was some red, is it on the object? Was the object red, or do you know?
It looked like it was red fingernail polish right on top of the nail. And if you look directly on it, your nail, it's clear, right? And I thought I saw that. At the same time, it was laying in Dr. Lee's hand on a little bit of an angle. And that's when I could see what I thought would have been silver. And I took it to be lead transfer. And I just looked at it, never thought in my life this would become an issue, and just said, it's a fingernail. And that was it.
Let me ask you this question, Mr. White, just to be clear. Do you know, in fact, whether it was a fingernail?
Do I know it was a fingernail?
Right.
Can I give you a scale from 1 to 10?
If that's how you're going to evaluate it, yes, you can.
Well, in all fairness, 9.5. It's a fingernail.
And
I'll give myself a little bit of elbow room. I didn't pick it up and really examine it. I looked at it. It just looked like a fingernail.
did it look like a human fingernail?
Like a what?
A human fingernail?
Yeah. Yes, sir. I'm sorry.
Was it, did you see some red on this object?
Yes.
And you thought that was fingernail polish? That's the two things.
I did, but it also could have been blood.
Mm-hmm. And do you know what the difference is between a human fingernail and like an acrylic type substance, anything like that?
By just looking, probably not.
Mm-hmm.
Realistically, it looked like a defensive wounded fingernail.
And you described something silver on it, is that correct?
Yes.
And Are you saying that you know it was something from a bullet? Is that your testimony?
I'm not saying I know anything. What I'm saying is what I saw and what I believed it to be, because I've seen similar lead transfers on bodies before, and on fingernails and on bone.
And Dr. Lee, whatever it was, disagreed with what your assessment was. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And did you have any type of magnifying device, like either magnifying glass or anything like that, to look at it?
No, I did not, sir. I had my glasses on. They're actually magnifying devices.
Pardon?
I had my glasses on. They're magnifying devices.
Very good. No further questions at this time.
Thank you. Redirect.
Mr. Clark, could we have, what is it, courts 3?
Somebody have it down there. Did you hand it to
Court 3
Wendy?
on the Elmo.
All right.
I think this was 4.
4 was a photo, 3 was the, right.
4 then. Thank
3
you.
is the press release.
May I approach?
You may.
I'm just going to ask you a couple questions. Defense counsel asked you with respect to this exhibit courts 4 to pinpoint where you were and where Dr. Lee was when you saw what you believed to be a fingernail. And you pointed and the like, and I'm going to offer you the laser pointer here. You push this top button.
All right, you know I'm Polish, so you have to explain this to me.
Okay, you push this top button, see?
Gotcha.
And then there comes the red light.
Gotcha.
Right? Okay.
All right.
So using courts exhibit 4 and the laser pointer, could you show us first where you were in relation to?
I would have been,
Okay. And where was Dr. Lee when you
indicating there for the record, off the picture to the right-hand side.
I think he found it right about here.
Dr. Lee?
Yes. And I think he walked over to about here when I walked up to him.
Let me clarify that. So where you indicated with respect to courts 4, when Dr. Lee, where he was when he found it, was at the base of the floorboard there between the,
Right in there.
the number 5 and
Pedestal.
some kind of pedestal, correct? Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And then where did Dr. Lee go next when you saw it, when you looked at the item?
When I went back to cutting the carpet, Dr. Lee had moved over to about here.
Okay, that was,
And I was aware of people coming over and looking at it at that point, and I would have been right about here.
so you went back to the location you indicated that you were first in when you
Yes,
heard Dr. Lee mention you found something, and you saw Dr. Lee walk, as we look at courts 4, to the right side, middle of the photograph, correct?
I believe so, yes.
And is that where you noticed, out of your side vision, so to speak, other people come towards Dr. Lee
Yes,
and appeared to look at whatever he had?
correct, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor, nothing further.
Thank you. Recross.
Yes, just briefly. Just to follow up on that conversation you just had, when Dr. Lee showed it to you, it was over here by the end of the stairs, where the stairs turn, somewhere in there. You've got a,
I believe he was in here. I think he moved with it. It could have been right there.
did you just testify you saw him pick it up, or you saw where he got it from, or you didn't?
No, the first time I saw him holding this object, he was standing completely erect. I never saw him pick it up, but I had noticed him out of the corner of my eye on his hands and knees right around here someplace.
Okay.
Right up against, right in that ridge line between the carpet and the molding.
Okay. So that's the last time you saw him. The next time you saw him, he was standing up with this object that you've described.
Yes, sir.
And how did your attention get drawn to Dr. Lee when he was standing up? Did he say, take a look at this? Or did you hear his conversation?
I heard him say that he found some tissue. That's what I thought he said, tissue. So I got up to look at it.
And we've talked about whether it was blood or tissue.
Exactly.
Okay, very good. Nothing further to stop.
Thank you.
Oh, wait, hold on.
All right.
Did you ever speak with a person by the name of Diamond?
You know, this would have been my first day with Shapiro's defense team. And there were two young guys there. And I can't I don't think I ever did. I think I talked to the other fellow, but they were both about the same age and the same height.
Well, what do you mean other fellow?
The other fellow was in Bob Shapiro's office, and I don't know if he was with us that night. I think he was. The bottom line is that these were all new faces for me.
Okay. Now, yesterday I asked you to come in to see if somebody recognized you was on the
Right.
witness stand, and you were there. You saw the person on the witness stand.
Right.
Was he there?
That fellow?
Yeah, the fellow was on the witness stand yesterday that tried to identify you. Didn't know you.
He could have been, counsel. I wasn't paying any attention to him.
You didn't recognize him, and he may have been there or not. You simply don't know.
Yes.
Okay. Did you, when you were looking at this object with Dr. Lee hand in his hand, do you recall anybody being near you and Dr. Lee?
I remember Bill Pavlik being in the room. I remember Sarah Kaplan being in the room. I remember Bob Shapiro, excuse me, I think over in this area.
We should identify that.
It's above where the pedestal is, past where the staircase begins, I believe.
Towards the window door,
Yes.
outside door. Thank you. That's about right.
I remember Auntie Pavlik and some other young man running around, setting up lights and so forth.
Okay. But as far as you and Dr. Lee, when you were looking at it, was there anybody standing close to you, observing what you were doing or talking about?
All these people were within between 8 to 10 feet.
Okay, I'm talking about more or less like somebody being like the three of us all looking at something. There'd be three of you there other than you and Dr. Lee.
I think I was alone. I just walked up and looked at it.
Okay.
I don't remember anybody being very close to him,
Okay.
but being in the general vicinity of him.
Do you recall if Dr. Lee was wearing some type of latex gloves or not?
He did, he should have. I wasn't paying any attention.
Now, you said that you collected this stain of blood. What did you do with it?
I collected it. I marked it. I kept it in my safe at home for 1 year. On, I believe, the 26th of February, 2004, or when was it? No. Was it 5? The bottom line is that I ended up sending it to Dr. Lee.
This stained carpet.
Yes,
And do you know where you sent it to him at?
in Connecticut.
Was it in a bindle or a envelope?
It was properly packaged, and it was sent in a large envelope, which was placed inside a large FedEx envelope, overnight.
Was this a pool of blood that you had
It's
cut out?
dried, sir.
Dried pool of dried blood? Did you collect any other evidence?
Shotgun.
Did you tell Detective Littlefield that you had collected this swatch of blood or this dried blood?
No.
Did you tell Deputy DA Sortino that you had that?
If he asked me, I told him. It was no secret that I had these two things. I basically, when Leslie Abramson took over the case, I got rid of the evidence.
Did anybody ask you to send it to Dr. Lee?
Yes.
Who was
Robert Shapiro.
Did you ever, this gentleman that was on the witness stand yesterday, we'll call him Mr. Diamond, that attempted to identify, did you ever talk with him yesterday or today?
No.
Has he ever made any attempt to contact you?
No, sir.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Thanks. Nothing further, Your
All right, subject to recall, you may step down. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Your Honor.
May I inquire with counsel real quick?
Yes? Oh, sir, you're not to discuss your testimony with anyone except counsel in this case?
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, but I just want to see, yeah, go ahead, you take your break and.
Are we on a break?
We're off the record because Cindy's changing some paper. What do you want? Do you want to come back in chambers with us or?
Sure.
All right, back on the record. Do you have any other witnesses that are going to be called?
Not for today.
No, Your Honor.
Right now.
All right, we want to, first of all, tomorrow, I've instructed district attorney to follow up on something. We need Mr. Diamond brought into court 9:30 in the morning. And Dr. Lee is obviously a necessary witness. My understanding is he is in China, and we will have to await his return to reach his portion of the testimony for this case. So we'll wait till he comes back, and then we'll work out a date, probably on a Friday, to bring him in and continue the hearing as soon as possible. I understand it's going to be about 2 weeks.
Approximately, again, I don't know where he goes from this China.
Okay. We'll have other witnesses tomorrow, you indicated.
But we're trying to get other witnesses, and we have some subpoenaed for this afternoon, but we're not sure if they were substitute service and they're not here, so
All right.
we may have somebody tomorrow morning. We've got several witnesses that are on call that we anticipate would be on call because we weren't sure what the schedule was. So if we can line those up, we'll get those ready to go tomorrow, and we'll go all day.
Okay.
Could we have a sense of who those people might be?
Why don't you discuss that among yourselves? And so we'll be in recess till 9:30 tomorrow?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, I apologize, Your Honor.
That's all right.
The LAPD has, I believe, probably some investigative information regarding Mr. Diamond. We're asking it to be turned over to the defense and not the prosecution. We believe we're entitled to that. Our position, we were sort of in the dark, or we were in the dark until the other day when the court brought this issue to our attention and scheduled this hearing that we're in front of. But the people have known about it for a while. The court knew because of the appointment of the special master.
The people did not know. They only knew that there had been the contact and then had the special master appointed and they were out of it.
Right, I understand that. That's what I'm saying. Is they knew there was something going on. We knew nothing about anything until the issue was raised by the court a few days ago, as the court has indicated on the record. But we feel we're at least entitled to look at the LAPD information ourselves in order to evaluate and to further present evidence regarding the credibility of Mr. Diamond.
Well, that can be turned over to the court. If there's information that's in possession of Los Angeles Police Department, it can be turned over to me before it's turned over to you to see what it is. I have no problem with taking receipt in camera or under seal.
I don't know if they have reports or recordings or what.
I don't know either.
I would ask the court at least get it under seal, and then we'd be allowed. Look, I don't see no reason why we can't.
I'm sure there's no reason why you can't. I'm just saying it's more appropriate for me to take possession of it.
That's fine.
Well, let me answer in 2 steps. I'm happy if the court wants to call the detectives and have them deliver whatever they have to the court.
That's fine.
I do have a problem with I mean, where everybody's on the same footing now. What they're suggesting is that they would get to cross-examine Mr. Diamond on stuff that we don't know
The
about.
bottom line is I'm going to review it to see if it's privileged. If as long as there's no privilege, I agree, you get exactly what they get. You're not entitled to anything that's not privileged any more than they are. But if it's privileged, then the prosecution should not see it.
I understand.
All right, that's what we'll do if you can arrange that. So 9:30 tomorrow morning. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, now we're going to get in a time machine and travel 18 years into the future and see what is going on with Alan Jackson today. And and I said it, I've changed the time on the Karen Reed hearing 3 times this morning. Yeah, that was crazy. I know. And they kept going back to it. And I was like, you guys, can we stop with the ice cream? It's ridiculous. It would be, did you hear a dog barking? Did you see ice cream? Did you hear a dog barking? Did you see ice cream? It's like back and forth, ice cream dog, ice cream dog, ice cream dog. And we're all like, can we ask some questions that matter, please? Can we? Okay, Mel, see you later. Okay, so I will see you guys over on the other stream, whoever is going with me in the time machine. And I'm going to get a cup of coffee and I will see you guys over there. Bye.